Hello and welcome to the Ruth MacFit podcast, where we chat all things health, fitness, nutrition, and how to build habits that actually work with your life. Now, if you're enjoying these episodes, then it really helps if you like and you subscribe. And I absolutely love hearing from you. So please do leave a comment, maybe a 5-star review, and let me know what has resonated with you. Right, let's get into today's episode. Hello, welcome back. I hope you're having a lovely start to February. Now, one day, maybe I'll be one of those people that does their hair and makeup before they come and record a podcast. But I did go out for a run this morning, came back, had breakfast, had a shower, and didn't dry my hair. And now I'm sitting here chatting to you with wet hair. But in my defense, if I dry my hair, it does tend to do this floofy thing. So I'm going to use that and just say it's intentional. So just so you know. Alas, today's podcast episode is not just about one thing. I was going to do it about one topic. And then I thought, if I make that a full podcast length, I'm just going to be repeating things again and again and really hammering home something that you'll have got to grips with in a short amount of time. So I've actually decided to cover a few different things that I've come across on social media during the week, things I've thought about myself, and then linked to some studies as well that I've also been looking at. So without further ado, I think it would be good to start with the whole running thing, because I did go for a run this morning, but it hasn't been easy this week. I'm not going to pretend it's always easy, because there are some times where it does just feel like a struggle. And on Saturday, my brunch run, I love my brunch run, but I chose not to do it. I wasn't even ill. So you could say, oh, if you weren't ill, you should have just cracked on and did it. But I wasn't feeling 100% either. So yeah, I could have gone out and done it, but I'm really trying to listen to my body, because there was a time where I didn't at all. And that resulted in me being very, very, very poorly. And I don't want to go back there again. So I do try really hard to listen to my body. And it felt like it was just saying, you're run down and you need to take a little break. We had friends coming in the afternoon, and I knew that I would be going, thinking about, if it's slower, am I going to take too long to get back in time to sort stuff out? So it felt like the right decision to not go for a run. And again, normally I'd think, oh, well, if I'm not going to run, I'll go for a walk instead. And I do encourage that thinking. But again, I was feeling pretty run down and decided to not even do that as well. And I didn't try and go running again on the Sunday, because Sunday is always a rest day for me. And I didn't want to just try and add something in that I'd missed. I made a decision to not do it, and I was just going to get back into my routine the following week. And it hasn't been easy this week either. I've still not felt like the energy is quite there. I've still gone on Tuesday. I went and I just adapted, did something a little bit different. And today I went for a run with the dogs and I walked up the hills. Now, it would be easy, very easy to think that this was down to losing fitness. And I know a lot of people will go through that mentality as well. And I definitely used to do that. I'd go out and have a bad run and think, oh, you're just really unfit. But those of you that might have listened to the podcast, I think a few weeks ago, might remember that I said how I felt like my running was going really well. And the thing is, you don't just lose fitness like that. Our aerobic fitness declines in around 2 to 3 weeks of inactivity, not a few days. And actually, if you're worried about missing some strength training, that takes even longer, and that's due to neuromuscular adaptations. Now, one of the reasons I think I've been struggling is because my sleep's not been so good. I am in the luteal phase of my cycle, and I do find that is getting a little bit harder than it used to be. I don't know if it's an age thing. I'm 43, I'm going to be 44, but sleep is definitely worse at this time of the month for some reason at the moment, and it's having an impact on my running. Now, you'll see online people saying that you should adapt your training around your cycle. You don't have to. If you feel good, crack on. If you don't, then yeah, absolutely adapt and adjust. But there are some times where I feel like just before my cycle starts that I'm good to go. I'm absolutely fine. But at the moment, it does feel like I'm having to adapt. But the reassuring thing is knowing that this feeling will pass and I will start to feel more like myself and fitter again. And like everything, what we do the majority of the time, our consistency with our training over time is going to matter far more than any single session will. And sometimes when we're choosing to take it a little bit easier, we're going to then go into our next session feeling stronger and better. But it's not always easy to do, because often when we've pushed through so much, and this is what happened to me, when we've pushed through so much, we can think to ourselves, but I never feel better. And then you're worried about missing some, and you assume that that's just your normal. But for me, the time that I was pushing through and never listening to my body, I ended up with a very bad autoimmune condition. So I am really trying to, as the years go on, take note and listen and rest. But it isn't always easy to do, because it's like we feel like if we skip that session, we've lost the routine. But the reassuring thing is, each time you do it and you go back and you feel better for it, then you can remind yourself of that. And actually, if we think about coaching in general, you see people talk about deload weeks. Often people will program in a deload week every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks, where they are taking some time, not necessarily off the gym, but they'll lighten their load. So they might just go to lighter weight exercises. They might focus on mobility or stretching, or they might actually take some time off. And that is something that's worth considering as well. It might be that you say, okay, I'm going to stick to the plan, but I'm also going to go a little bit lighter every certain amount of time, just to give my body time to recover properly if it's constantly training. Now I want to talk to you about something I've seen on Instagram that got my goat a bit. It did upset me. And I say it upset me. It didn't really upset me. What surprised me were the comments, because I thought everyone's going to be on this thinking this is absolutely ridiculous. But they weren't. People were like, oh my goodness, this is so interesting. I hadn't realized that. So there's this, I don't know if it's a trend, but I'm seeing it a fair bit. And it's like blown up to loads of views. I guess it's the simple structure of it, but it's got different foods or drinks coming up on the screen, and it goes once a day, once a week, once a month. And it will have things like, I'm going to give an example. It will go water once a day, Diet Coke once a week, alcohol once a month. And then the next one might be Greek yogurt once a day, Halo Top yogurt once a week, and ice cream once a month. And it continues with things like chocolate and cake being once a month things, you know, the more indulgent foods being the once a month. And it even actually had canned tuna as once a week. And when I looked in the comments, the guy was like, oh, it's because of the mercury. Now, canned tuna is lower in mercury than tuna steaks anyway. And, you know, you can have it more than once a week. We don't need to worry too much about that. But alas, regardless, the issue isn't with the mercury and the fact that what he was saying seemed a bit bonkers. It was the fact that this sort of thinking creates this pass fail mentality. So a lot of people will think that they like this because it gives them structure, it gives them rules to follow. They can have that in their brain thinking, right, I am only allowed this then. That feels good. But most of us long term will not be eating like this, and nor do we need to. What we eat the majority of the time is going to make a bigger difference than one single food will. So if you know that you're filling your plates the rest of the time, your meals, with nutrient dense food, and then you're choosing to have something that's more indulgent, less often, but making it enjoyable, then it's not going to be a problem. And for you, that might be some chocolate each day, or it might be a bit of cake a few times a week, or even once a week, whatever it is. It's knowing that you have the structure around the rest of your eating that means that you can do that and be aware of where it fits with your goals. There doesn't need to be any rules around it. And this is why I really have a problem with the term good food and bad food, because there are foods that you will want to eat the majority of the time because they're going to support your energy, make you feel good. And there are foods that you're probably going to want to have less often, because if they took up the majority of what you ate, then you could feel pretty shitty. But they serve another purpose, and that is just enjoyment. So they're not bad, but they're not things that you'll want all the time. And I like the no crap cake condition, because I think sometimes we eat these foods in reaction mode because we're like, oh, I shouldn't be having it, so I'm just going to pick. We never actually truly enjoy them because we're just picking at them, and we're not sitting down and having a proper piece. We're just having little bits here and there. So with the no crap cake condition, I'm like, ask yourself if you'd like that, really like it, or if there's something else you prefer later. And then if it is something you'd really like, is this the time where you're going to be really enjoying it? Like, I used to be somebody who might buy a cake and then pick at it. And then by the time I got home, it wasn't there. I couldn't even sit down and enjoy it. And I hadn't even noticed it going. So now if I am going to buy a cake, I will be buying it and taking it home with me and having a cup of tea and sitting down and enjoying every single bite. So less often, more enjoyable, no crap cake condition. And We really do need to stop demonizing foods in total. I like to think of it as, instead of what do we need to take out of our diet, ask yourself, what do I need to add into my diet? Because if you're adding in more fiber, more protein, and those types of things, you'll probably find that those other things naturally reduce anyway, because you're going to feel way more satiated and fuller. And it feels much nicer to think, I'm going to be adding these things in rather than I'm taking those things away. So that's just a little note. I don't know if anyone's seen those. If you have, put a comment in, because I'd love to know what you've seen people saying that you shouldn't be eating on Instagram, because it is mind blowing, really. And now we get on to what I was going to do a full podcast on, but it was something I found quite interesting, because while we're talking about black and white thinking, I could also talk about the 10,000 step goal rule, because I've seen a recent study about steps and activity, which I wanted to mention, but I thought actually it does link in with black and white thinking a little bit, because of the fact that 10,000 steps is often that number that we feel like we need to achieve. Now, don't get me wrong, for a lot of people that can be really nicely motivating, but for others it can feel unachievable, and it can feel like unless you get there, you've failed. So first of all, I think we can talk about this 10,000 step number, because that was not created because of any scientific research or backing. It was actually a marketing campaign from 1965, I believe that was the date. It was a pedometer that they were trying to promote in the run up to the Tokyo Olympics. And I think it was Mampo K. I might be saying that wrong, but it translates as 10,000 step meter. And the reason they chose it is because they thought it sounded catchy, it was challenging and motivating, but achievable to promote this active lifestyle in the run up to the Olympics. And also the symbol for 10,000 in Japanese, they felt looked a bit like a walking man. So that was another tick there. Not based on science at all, but it's something we still try and follow and aim for. That being said, since then, studies have looked at steps and how they can impact our health, our long-term health outcomes in particular, and they are quite a good measure. Obviously, they aren't perfect because they are only picking up the general activity, but actually the general activity, us just getting up and moving throughout the day, is quite important. I know several people that would go and do cardio maybe a few times a week, short bursts, and then be very, very inactive the rest of the time. And that's not so great. We do want to be getting up and moving around, and looking at our steps can help with that. But it is quite annoying if you're like pushing a pushchair or you're carrying your phone or whatever you're doing and it's not picked up on the watch. And different watches can be more receptive than others. So they aren't perfect, but it can be quite a nice way. And they can be motivating for some, but for others that feel like 10,000 steps is way off, it can be a bit demoralizing. It can be hard work. It can be a bit kind of, well, what do I do now? But actually, the studies that have been done show that the improvements tend to happen way, way lower than 10,000 steps, and particularly for those people that are quite inactive. So the improvements start at around 4,000 to 5,000 steps and then peter out around 7,000 to 9,000 steps. That's not saying that more isn't going to be beneficial. It's just saying that the biggest impact is with those people that are pretty inactive and going from like a low activity level and improving it to a moderate activity level. That tends to have the biggest overall outcome on long-term health than getting 10, 12,000 steps as an average. So it's definitely worth just looking to increase your steps a little bit from where you are if you are sitting in that kind of fairly inactive level at the moment. And a jump from 3,000 steps to 6,000 steps is actually going to be absolutely brilliant. And I guess the main thing to think from this is there isn't a magic number at all. And I like to think of it as if you're choosing a step goal, because it can be quite nice to aim for a step goal, but look at what you're currently getting and aim to improve it from there. So if you're currently getting 3,000 steps a day as an average, then looking to increase that to 5,000 would be amazing. And then you can, once that's a habit, you can then build up from there. But if you're currently getting 7,000, then you might want to go to 9,000. The choice is yours. It's very personal. There's also been a more recent study, because I have been asked quite a few times, does it matter how I get my steps? Do I need to go for a walk? Can I just get them around the house? Now, for general activity and just seeing that we're not just sitting down all day, then just getting in your steps is great, just do it however you want. But there has been a more recent study. It's a big study. It was like 9,500 people and looked at how they were accumulated, not just the total number of steps. And they measured very short bursts of movements in comparison to longer, sustained 10 to 15 minute walks. And the people that were doing the 10 to 15 minute walks ended up with lower cardiovascular risk, better overall health outcomes. And this was, again, especially noticeable in those that were inactive the rest of the time. So if people are struggling to get 10,000 steps, for example, or whatever it is they've been aiming for, then even aiming to get that 10 to 15 minute walk in the day is great for long-term health outcomes. And this does make sense, especially with cardiovascular health, because when we're walking for a longer period of time, our heart rate is going to be elevated for longer. If we're walking outside, we've got more chance of the terrain varying and so on, which can be also a little bit more fatiguing. It's going to increase our breathing demand, and it's going to create that sustained cardiovascular stimulus. And that isn't to say that that short movement, that 5-minute movement isn't still valuable. They did see benefits to that as well. It's just there was this greater improvement in those that were doing the slightly longer 10 to 15 minute walks. But the reason I enjoyed looking at this study is because this is the first time it's looked at how our steps are accumulated. But I also don't think it takes much of our imagination to understand why that would be the case if we are looking at cardiovascular health. If we want our heart to be working well, we want to be using it in a way that gets it working a little bit as well. But it doesn't necessarily need to be that hardcore cardio, and it doesn't necessarily need to be 30-minute workouts. 10 to 15 minutes is shown to make a difference, which is fantastic. I know a lot of you focus on steps for fat loss, and I thought it might be quite good just to mention that as well, because walking a little bit more if you're pretty inactive is going to increase how much energy you're using throughout the day. It can make a difference to fat loss, and movement and walking has been shown to help regulate appetite as well. I don't know if anyone else has noticed that when they're exercising a bit more, they actually feel like they can make better choices with food. Maybe they're feeling a bit calmer, and that helps. And that is absolutely great, of course, but it can work the other way around as well. So those people that are pushing themselves to get as many steps as possible, feeling a little bit stressed about it, feel like they need to do it as a way to put themselves in a greater deficit, there is a danger there, because if you're not then fueling the amount of calories that you might need for that sustained effort, you can end up over restricting, and that makes it harder to be mindful. You're trying to rely on willpower to get you through, feeling a bit stressed as well, and you can end up overeating. So I know that I can get this if I'm not careful on my long run days, where if I haven't eaten something quite soon after my run, I can end up they call it the rungeries, just overeating later. And you might be very aware of what's happening, but it's very, very hard to not do that when your body's just desperate for some calories. So again, relying on willpower when you are over restricted is really hard. So if you're basing your calories on what you would expect to be having to eat if you were just getting an average number of activity, and then you're just pushing for more and more and more and feeling like more is better, it could be making it harder if you're not careful. You definitely want to make sure that you're still in a reasonable deficit for what you're doing, not going too extreme either way. And now on to the next little study that I've been looking at. I take collagen, and I'm always a bit kind of like, I do take it, but I see all the time people going, don't waste your money on collagen. And then you'll see people like Davina McCall advertising collagen, loads of people swearing by it. And I guess part of the debate goes around the fact that if you're not drinking enough water, if you're not wearing your factor 50 and eating well, then collagen just is a drop in the ocean. But when I started taking collagen, I did notice an improvement in my nails. And I thought, well, who cares if it's a placebo? All up for it being placebo, fine, whatever. I've got nicer nails, so I'll just go with it. But I would also be wary of recommending it to people, because there is this kind of debate going on. And then I was looking through the studies again today, and I noticed a new study that was talking about collagen and bone density. And I thought, interesting, another thing saying that collagen can be useful. So I thought I'd just go back and look at the science a little bit here again. And there are many randomized controlled trials that show that with skin, for example, that collagen peptides can improve skin elasticity and wrinkle depth moderately after 8 to 12 months. Now, we have to look at these carefully, because as I was saying earlier, if you're not doing the other things, then it can be a drop in the ocean. And the studies show a small improvement, but alas, they were shown to have some improvement. And then when it comes to bone density, and this was the systematic review that I was looking at this morning, it showed that collagen peptide supplementation did improve bone density in people with osteopenia and osteoarthritis. And that was against a placebo. So again, I think it's this gray area. People will say it's the best thing ever, and people will say it's complete waste of money. But actually, it's not a magic answer to everything, but it's not useless either. And if you're finding that you're noticing it's helping you, then there's absolutely no harm in you choosing to take that without worrying about what it says or what one person's saying on the internet. But it is worth remembering that it works best alongside adequate protein, strength training, getting enough sleep, protecting your skin with some high factor face cream, and staying hydrated. It's part of it. That's the thing about supplements. They are meant to supplement our lifestyle and what we're doing the rest of the time. They aren't going to go in and fix everything. But if you're doing those things and you're taking collagen, then it can be something that can add a little extra benefit. So why not? Hey, crack on. I mean, I feel a bit of a cheek at the moment because I always sleep pretty well in the past, but this last few months, and I thought it's because of Christmas, but my sleep has been off kilter. I don't know whether I'm getting to the point where I can blame hormones, but I'm trying really hard. Just finding that I'm waking at night. In fact, actually, I will share on here what's keeping me awake at night. So in the past, I've suffered with restless legs, but I'm sort of getting the restless legs, but it's like this little popping through my muscles, and it's just waking me up. And then you're lying there tired, wanting to go to sleep, and you just feel this pop, pop in my muscles. So I don't know. I've been thinking maybe it's a mineral deficiency, maybe it's magnesium, but alas, I'm working on it. But that is quite frustrating. So maybe my collagen is doing a bit less now that I'm not sleeping quite as well. So if we're looking at what I've discussed today as a whole, the training when tired, the food rules that we see on Instagram, our step counts and supplements, they can all trigger the same mental shortcut, right or wrong, good or bad. And the reason our brains do this is because it can reduce that overwhelm of trying to make a decision. Somebody's told you a rule, so you're going to follow that rule. And it gives you that sense of control. You've got something to aim for. And I'm like steps, for example, I like to have a step goal to aim for. So we've got to be realistic, and we have to understand there's not a magic number, and it can make our decisions easier. But our long-term health isn't going to respond best to these rigid rules. It's going to respond better to consistency, flexibility, and being able to adapt and adjust when needed, because not every day is going to be the same. Our energy and time is going to be pulled in different directions at different times. So we need to be able to listen, because if we don't, our body normally shouts a bit louder, and that's no fun either. Health is absolutely not built on perfect days. It's built on the days that we adjust, but we keep going. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, do make sure that you're following or that you've subscribed so you don't miss out on the next one. And if you want some support putting this into practice, then come and join us inside the Ruth McFit app. This is where we focus on building strength, confidence, and consistency in a way that feels good and that fits your life. All the links will be in the show notes.